The autumn sun was setting behind Manhattan's towering skyscrapers as a sleek black Tesla pulled up to the grand entrance of the Wellington Hotel. The doorman barely glanced at the car, his eyes already fixed on the luxury vehicles lined up behind it. As the door opened, a woman stepped out, her designer blazer catching the last rays of sunlight. She was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in America, though you wouldn't guess it from her humble smile as she thanked her driver. The clicking of her heels echoed through the marble lobby as she walked confidently toward the front desk, pulling her small carry-on behind her. The chandelier above cast dancing shadows across the floor, and the sweet scent of fresh flowers filled the air. She'd chosen this hotel carefully for her upcoming business meeting. Its reputation for luxury and excellence matched perfectly with her company's image. Taking a deep breath, she approached the front desk with the same confidence that had helped her build a billion-dollar empire from scratch. The reservation had been confirmed twice, once by her assistant and once by herself, just to be sure. The front desk manager, a middle-aged man with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses, was typing away at his computer, seemingly oblivious to her presence. After what felt like an eternity, he finally looked up, his eyes moving from her face to her designer bag, then back to her face. His expression shifted from disinterest to something else, something she had seen too many times before. That familiar knot formed in her stomach, but she kept her smile steady. "Good evening," she said warmly. "I have a reservation for tonight and tomorrow." The presidential suite. The manager's fingers hovered over his keyboard, but he didn't type anything. Instead, he cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Your name?" he asked, his tone notably cooler than the one he'd used with the guest before her. She provided her details, watching as he made a show of typing and frowning at his screen. The lobby had grown quieter, or perhaps it just felt that way. A couple nearby had stopped their conversation to watch the interaction unfold. "I'm not seeing any reservation under that name," he said, though his eyes never really searched the screen. "Are you sure you have the right hotel?" She pulled out her phone, opened her email, and turned it toward him. "Here's the confirmation email from your hotel. Sent 3 days ago, confirmed yesterday." The manager barely glanced at the phone. "Our system must be having issues," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the Holiday Inn downtown. They usually have vacancies." The suggestion hung in the air like a heavy cloud. A few heads turned their way, and she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger carefully controlled by years of similar experiences. She stood straighter, her grip tightening slightly on her phone. The man behind her in line shifted uncomfortably, also witnessing this obvious display of discrimination. But she wasn't about to let this moment break her. She'd faced worse obstacles building her company from the ground up. "I'd like to speak to your general manager," she said, her voice calm but firm. The words carried across the now silent lobby, where several guests had stopped to watch the scene unfold. The front desk manager's smile tightened. "I'm afraid he's not available at the moment. Again, I must suggest." She already had her phone to her ear, dialing her lawyer's number. Sometimes the best response to discrimination wasn't a raised voice, but a strategic move. As she waited for the call to connect, she made a mental note to look into this hotel's ownership structure. After all, real change often required action from the top. Little did anyone in that lobby know that this moment of rejection would set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just the Wellington Hotel, but the entire industry's approach to inclusivity. Later that evening, in her downtown office overlooking the city lights, the tech CEO sat at her desk, her untouched cup of green tea growing cold. The incident at the hotel kept playing in her mind, but instead of letting it discourage her, her analytical brain was working overtime. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she dug deeper into the Wellington Hotel's history. A message popped up on her screen from a fellow executive in her business network. "Saw your post about the Wellington. Not surprised. The same thing happened to my wife last month." Then another message arrived, and another. Soon her inbox was flooding with similar stories from other successful professionals who'd faced discrimination at the same hotel. She leaned back in her chair, running her hands through her hair. This wasn't just about one bad experience, it was a pattern. Opening a new tab, she began researching the hotel's financial records. As a public company, much of their information was accessible. The more she read, the more her eyes widened. The prestigious Wellington Hotel, despite its grand facade, was drowning in debt. Their outdated management practices had led to declining bookings, and their reputation was barely holding together through old money connections. She picked up her phone and called her financial advisor. "Hey, I need everything you can find on the Wellington Hotel Group, their debt structure, ownership patterns, everything." She paused, looking at the city lights twinkling outside her window. "And I need it tonight." For the next few hours, she pored over documents with her team. The hotel's occupancy rates had been dropping steadily for the past 3 years. Reviews mentioned rude staff and selective service. Yet somehow, they kept getting glowing write-ups in certain magazines, all owned by members of the same old money social circle. Around midnight, her phone buzzed with a message from a former employee of the hotel. "I left because I couldn't stand their discriminatory practices anymore. They have an unofficial policy of maintaining their traditional client base. It made me sick." She walked to the window, watching the late-night traffic below. The Wellington Hotel was visible from her office, its elegant architecture lit up against the night sky. It had once been a symbol of luxury and excellence, built in the 1920s by an immigrant who believed in the American dream. Somewhere along the way, that vision had been corrupted. The pieces were falling into place in her mind. The hotel's financial struggles, their resistance to change, their discriminatory practices, it was all connected. They were clinging to an outdated way of doing business, and it was costing them everything. Her assistant knocked on the door with fresh tea. "You're still here? It's almost midnight." She turned from the window, a small smile playing on her lips. "I think I just found our next big project." She picked up a report from her desk. "Did you know the Wellington Hotel's main loan is coming due next month? And they're nowhere near being able to refinance under current management." Her assistant raised an eyebrow, recognizing that look in her boss's eye. It was the same look she had when she spotted the gap in the tech market that made her company billions. "Get me a meeting with our investment team first thing tomorrow," she said, her voice filled with determination. "And reach out to those former employees who contacted us. I want to hear their stories." As she gathered her things to finally head home, she took one last look at the Wellington Hotel through her window. Its elegant facade hid years of discrimination and mismanagement, but not for much longer. Where others saw a crumbling institution, she saw an opportunity, not just for profit, but for real change. Her phone buzzed again with another message from someone sharing their experience at the hotel. She smiled, thinking how none of these people knew what was coming. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about getting better, bigger, and creating the change you wanted to see. Tomorrow, she would start putting her plan into action. The Wellington Hotel had no idea that their biggest mistake wasn't just turning away a billionaire, it was turning away a visionary who knew how to turn obstacles into opportunities. The next 3 months moved like a carefully choreographed dance. The tech CEO turned her full attention to acquiring the Wellington Hotel, but she knew rushing would only alert them to her plans. In her corner office, she spread out papers across her desk, creating a timeline for what she called Project Transformation. Her first move was subtle. Through a series of small investment companies, she began buying up the hotel's debt on the secondary market. Each purchase was just small enough to avoid raising eyebrows. It was like putting together a puzzle, piece by piece, with nobody seeing the full picture except her. One rainy Tuesday morning, she walked into the Wellington Hotel's coffee shop, dressed in casual clothes. Nobody recognized her from that first night. She ordered a cappuccino and sat in the corner watching. The place was barely half full, even during peak breakfast hours. A group of tourists walked in, then quickly walked out after getting lukewarm service. She made notes on her phone, counting empty tables and observing staff interactions. Back at her office, she met with historians who shared fascinating details about the hotel's past. It was actually quite progressive when it first opened, an elderly historian told her, showing black and white photos from the 1920s. The original owner believed luxury shouldn't have barriers. Somewhere along the way, that vision got lost. Her team discovered that the hotel's current troubles went deeper than just discrimination. The building needed major renovations that the current owners had been putting off. The kitchen equipment was outdated, The reservation system was ancient, and the staff training program hadn't been updated in 15 years. She spent evenings researching successful hotel turnarounds, making plans for modernization that wouldn't destroy the building's historic charm. Her assistant caught her one night, surrounded by books on hotel management and architectural preservation. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" her assistant asked, bringing in a late-night coffee. "This isn't just about buying a hotel," she replied, sketching ideas for a new lobby layout. "It's about restoring something to what it should have been all along, and maybe showing a few people they were wrong about who belongs where." As weeks passed, she built a dream team in secret. An expert in historical renovation, a hospitality consultant known for building inclusive luxury brands, and a training specialist who had transformed toxic workplace cultures. They met in her office after hours, planning everything down to the smallest detail. She also reached out to other hotel owners who had successfully made similar transformations. "The key," one told her, "is to change the culture without losing the class. Show people that excellence and inclusivity aren't opposites, they're partners." The current hotel management remained oblivious to what was happening. They were too focused on their declining bookings and mounting maintenance issues to notice that their debt was slowly being consolidated under new ownership. Their arrogance had become their blindness. 2 months in, she had a close call. While reviewing documents in a cafe across from the hotel, she spotted the manager who had turned her away that first night. He walked right past her table, not even glancing her way. She smiled into her coffee cup, knowing that soon enough he would remember her face very well. By the end of the 3rd month, everything was in place. She had acquired enough debt to control the hotel's fate, gathered a team ready to transform it, and developed a clear vision for its future. The last piece of the puzzle was the timing. "The annual shareholders' meeting is next week," her financial advisor reported. "They'll have to address the debt situation. That's when we move." She stood at her office window that evening, watching the sunset reflect off the Wellington's windows. Soon, those same windows would reflect a new era of hospitality, one that welcomed everyone who could afford it, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. Her phone buzzed, another message from someone sharing their story of discrimination at the hotel. She had been collecting these stories, each one fueling her determination. Soon, very soon, these stories would transform from complaints into testimonials of how much things had changed. The morning of the takeover started like any other at the Wellington Hotel. Guests checked out, staff bustled about, and the front desk manager straightened his tie, unaware that his world was about to turn upside down. Meanwhile, across town, the tech CEO was putting the final touches on a plan she'd carefully crafted for months. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her deep blue power suit. Today wasn't about revenge, it was about transformation. Her phone buzzed with messages from her legal team, confirming they were in position at various locations around the city. The pieces were finally falling into place. "All the paperwork is ready," her assistant said, handing her a leather portfolio. The current management has no idea what's about to hit them. They shared a knowing smile, remembering that uncomfortable night 3 months ago. At exactly 9 a.m., her team began executing their carefully orchestrated plan. While she headed to the bank to finalize the last financial transactions, her lawyers simultaneously filed paperwork at the county clerk's office and the Business Registration Bureau. By 10 a.m., she officially owned controlling interest in the Wellington Hotel Group. The hotel's security cameras captured the moment her legal team walked through the grand entrance. They moved with purpose, their briefcases containing documents that would reshape the hotel's future. The front desk manager, the same one who had turned her away, looked up from his computer with mild irritation at the approaching group. "We're here to see the general manager," the lead lawyer announced, placing a stack of papers on the counter. Immediately, in the manager's office on the top floor, the current ownership team was having their regular morning meeting, discussing ways to cut costs and maintain their standards. The knock on the door interrupted their conversation about replacing the minority housekeeping staff with more suitable workers. The CEO waited in her car outside, watching the scene unfold through the hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows. Her phone kept buzzing with updates from her team inside. The security staff had been quietly briefed and had already switched their allegiance, recognizing the legal authority of the new ownership. "Ma'am," her driver said, "They're ready for you." She took a deep breath, picked up her briefcase, and stepped out of the car. This time, walking through those grand doors felt different. The marble floors seemed to echo her footsteps with more authority. The chandelier light felt warmer, more welcoming. The lobby had fallen silent. Staff members stood frozen, watching as she walked confidently toward the elevator. The front desk manager's face drained of color as recognition dawned. She gave him a small, knowing smile as she passed. In the top-floor conference room, the previous owners sat in stunned silence, surrounded by her lawyers and stacks of documents proving the legitimacy of her takeover. When she walked in, their expressions ranged from shock to disbelief to barely concealed anger. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "I believe you have some questions about the recent changes in ownership. I'm happy to address them all." She opened her laptop, displaying a comprehensive presentation about her plans for the hotel's future. For the next hour, she outlined her vision, maintaining the hotel's luxury status while creating an inclusive environment, upgrading facilities while preserving historical features, and most importantly, transforming the culture from the ground up. One of the old owners, red-faced, sputtered, "You can't just come in here and change everything." She smiled, remembering his signature on the memo about maintaining traditional clientele. "Actually," she replied, sliding a document across the table, "I can. And I will. But first, let's discuss the years of documented discrimination that occurred under your management." By sunset, word had spread throughout the hotel. Staff gathered in small groups, whispering about the changes to come. Some were nervous, others hopeful. The front desk manager sat alone in the break room, his hands shaking as he remembered how he treated her that night. As she left the hotel that evening, she paused in the lobby, looking up at the chandelier that had witnessed so much. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, transforming this symbol of exclusion into a beacon of excellence for everyone. The following week turned the Wellington Hotel's polished offices into a hub of intense investigation. Filing cabinets that hadn't been opened in years were now spread wide, their contents carefully examined by a team of legal experts. The new owner sat at what used to be the general manager's desk, reading through complaint after complaint that had been quietly buried over the years. "Look at this one," her lead investigator said, placing another folder on her desk. A highly qualified hotel manager with 15 years of experience was rejected because they weren't the right fit. Their resume was perfect. She picked up the file, noting the applicant's impressive background at other luxury hotels worldwide. The deeper they dug, the more disturbing patterns emerged. In the employee break room, current staff members began coming forward with their own stories. A bellhop with 10 years of service described being repeatedly passed over for promotion. A talented chef shared how she was kept in junior positions while less experienced colleagues moved up. "I never thought anyone would actually listen," the chef said, wiping away tears. "We just learned to keep our heads down and stay quiet." The housekeeping staff, gathering courage from others speaking up, revealed a system of unfair scheduling and room assignments. The preferred staff got the better floors, bigger tips, and easier schedules. The others worked twice as hard for half the recognition. One morning, while reviewing security footage from the past year, the team discovered something shocking. The hotel had a code system. Certain room numbers were never assigned to guests of certain backgrounds, even when those rooms were empty. The front desk staff had been trained to claim these rooms were under maintenance or already booked. The investigation team set up a private office where current and former employees could share their experiences confidentially. The line often stretched down the hallway. People who had left years ago came back, finally seeing a chance to be heard. It wasn't just guests, a former receptionist revealed. "They had us screen job applications based on names. Anything that sounded too ethnic went straight to the rejection pile. I quit after 3 months. I couldn't sleep at night." The new owner spent long hours in that office, listening to every story. She took notes, asked questions, and assured each person that things would be different now. Her laptop filled with recordings and transcripts, building a clear picture of the hotel's toxic culture. They found evidence of qualified vendors being rejected for contracts because they were minority-owned businesses. Catering companies, maintenance services, and suppliers all turned away without proper consideration. The hotel's event planning records showed a pattern too. Certain types of celebrations were mysteriously impossible to accommodate, while similar events for preferred clients were welcomed with open arms. One evening, as she reviewed the day's findings with her team, an elderly maintenance worker knocked on the door. His hands trembled as he handed over a small notebook. "I've kept track," he said softly. "Every incident, every unfair decision, every cruel word. 23 years worth. I always hoped someone would care enough to make it right." She stayed late that night, reading through his careful notes. Each entry was a small piece of the larger puzzle, showing how discrimination had become woven into the hotel's daily operations. The investigation wasn't just about documenting past wrongs, it was about understanding how to make real, lasting change. They studied successful diversity initiatives from other hotels, consulted with inclusion experts, and began drafting new policies. By the end of the week, they had filled an entire conference room with evidence. Charts on the walls tracked patterns of discrimination. Spreadsheets showed the financial impact of these practices, millions lost in potential business, talent, and opportunities. Looking at it all, the new owner felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. This wasn't just about changing rules or updating policies. It was about healing wounds, rebuilding trust, and creating a place where everyone's dignity was respected. She picked up her phone and called her training team. "We're ready for the next phase," she said. "Let's show them what real hospitality looks like." The morning of the big confrontation arrived with a buzz of nervous energy in the Wellington Hotel's lobby. The chandeliers sparkled overhead as usual, but today they seemed to shine with extra intensity. The new owner had chosen this moment carefully, peak checkout time, when the lobby would be busiest. She stood outside those familiar glass doors, remembering how different it felt 3 months ago when she'd been turned away. This time, she wore the same outfit she'd worn that day, but her walk was different, her shoulders straighter, her purpose clear. Behind her, a team of consultants and new management staff waited quietly. The front desk manager was busy typing away at his computer, wearing that same look of superiority she remembered so well. He didn't even look up when the doors opened. The lobby was filled with guests checking out, bellhops moving luggage, and the usual morning bustle of a luxury hotel. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the desk. Her voice carried across the marble floor, strong and clear. The manager looked up, his expression changing from annoyed to confused to shocked in the span of seconds. He remembered her, she could see it in his eyes. Around them, the lobby had grown quieter, as if everyone could sense something important was about to happen. "I believe last time I was here, you couldn't find my reservation," she continued, her voice calm but firm. "Today, I'm not here for a room. I'm here as the owner." The words echoed through the suddenly silent lobby. A guest dropping their keycard made a sound that seemed to bounce off every wall. The manager's face had turned pale, his hands frozen over his keyboard. She turned to address the gathering crowd of staff and guests. 3 months ago, I was turned away from this hotel because of how I look. Today, I'm here to ensure that never happens to anyone else again." Her team began moving into position, some heading to the security office, others to human resources, all with clear purposes. The front desk manager started to stand, but she held up her hand. "Please, stay seated. We have a lot to discuss about the future of this hotel." From her briefcase, she pulled out a thick folder, all the evidence they'd gathered about years of discrimination. Security cameras captured every moment as she laid out paper after paper on the counter. "These are complaints that were buried, applications that were rejected without cause, stories from staff members who were passed over for promotions. Today, we start fixing all of that." The manager's hands were shaking now. Behind him, other staff members had gathered, some looking worried, others hopeful. A housekeeper in the corner was wiping away tears, while a bellhop stood straighter, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm not here for revenge," she continued, her voice softening slightly. "I'm here for change. Real, lasting change. And it starts right now." She pulled out another document, the new hotel policies, printed and ready for implementation. Every person who walks through these doors deserves respect. Every employee deserves a fair chance. And anyone who can't adapt to that simple truth will need to find another place to work. The manager finally found his voice. I didn't know. I was just following." Following orders, she finished for him. Yes, we found those orders too, but today we're writing new ones. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled out a chair and sat down at the counter. Tell me, she said to the manager, why did you really turn me away that day? I want to understand. The lobby remained silent as he struggled to find words. This wasn't going according to any script he knew. Here was power meeting prejudice not with anger, but with a question, an opportunity for honesty. It was the beginning of a difficult but necessary conversation, one that would echo through the halls of the Wellington Hotel for years to come. Change wasn't just about new ownership or new rules. It was about facing hard truths and choosing to be better. The Wellington Hotel's grand ballroom, usually reserved for luxury weddings and high-end conferences, had been transformed into a training center. Rows of chairs faced a stage where the new owner stood, addressing her entire staff, from housekeepers to executives. Change begins today, she announced, looking at each face in the crowd. But real change isn't just about new rules, it's about understanding each other better. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, highlighting both nervous and hopeful expressions in the audience. The front desk manager sat in the first row, his usual confidence replaced by quiet reflection. Next to him, a housekeeper who'd worked at the hotel for 20 years straightened her uniform, ready to finally be seen as more than just background staff. The first week of training started with something unexpected: storytelling. Every employee, regardless of position, shared their experiences. The maintenance supervisor spoke about fixing broken pipes at midnight to keep guests comfortable. A room service waiter described memorizing hundreds of guest preferences to make their stay special. I've worked here for 15 years, the chef said, her voice shaking slightly. Today is the first time anyone has asked about my journey. She went on to share how she learned cooking from her grandmother, bringing secret family recipes all the way from her homeland. The new owner brought in experts in hospitality and inclusion, but she also did something unusual. She invited successful hoteliers from different backgrounds to share their stories. These sessions weren't just lectures, they were conversations about real experiences and real solutions. One morning, she noticed the front desk manager sitting alone during lunch break. She joined him with a sandwich. "Tell me what you're thinking," she said simply. His response surprised her. "I never saw myself as prejudiced," he admitted. "But listening to everyone's stories, I'm starting to understand how many wonderful people I've overlooked." The training wasn't just about diversity, it was about excellence in service. They brought in tech experts to modernize the booking system. The maintenance team learned about the latest eco-friendly building practices. The kitchen staff trained with renowned chefs who specialized in various cultural cuisines. But the most powerful changes happened naturally. The bell captain, who'd been silently bearing discrimination for years, was finally promoted to guest services manager. His first act was to reorganize the schedule to give everyone fair access to premium shifts. In the kitchen, the chef began teaching her colleagues traditional recipes from her homeland. Soon, the hotel's restaurant was offering special fusion dishes that guests couldn't find anywhere else in the city. The housekeeping staff, no longer afraid to speak up, suggested improvements to room layouts that made their work more efficient and guest stays more comfortable. Their ideas were not only heard but implemented, with their names credited on the new room service cards. One day, the owner overheard two longtime employees chatting during their break. "It's like working at a completely different hotel," one said. "Yesterday, a guest asked my name for the first time in 5 years." The front desk manager, inspired by his own transformation, asked to lead a session on recognizing and overcoming unconscious bias. Standing before his colleagues, he shared his journey from prejudice to understanding. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. New talent began flowing in as word spread about the changes. A brilliant young concierge who'd been rejected by other luxury hotels brought fresh energy to the front desk. A talented pastry chef whose previous applications had been ignored now led the dessert program. The owner made sure every employee had a clear path for growth. Training programs, mentorship opportunities, and education stipends became standard benefits. The message was clear: everyone who worked hard could rise. 3 months into the transformation, she walked through the hotel late one night. The lobby hummed with warm conversations between staff and guests. In the restaurant, she heard languages from around the world. The hotel was coming alive in a way it never had before. "We're not just changing a hotel," she told her assistant as they watched the sunset from the rooftop garden. "We're showing the whole industry what's possible when you give everyone a fair chance." The Wellington Hotel buzzed with new energy 6 months into its transformation. The once stuffy lobby now felt like a vibrant meeting place where guests from all walks of life mingled freely. The sweet smell of fresh-baked pastries drifted from the newly renovated cafe, where the display case showcased treats from around the world. One morning, a young entrepreneur set up her tech startup's presentation in the hotel's conference room. Just a year ago, she might have been turned away. Now, she stood confidently before potential investors, using the hotel's state-of-the-art equipment. The owner watched from the back of the room, smiling as she remembered her own journey. "Your hotel's different," the entrepreneur told her later. "It feels like success is welcome here, no matter what package it comes in." The hotel had become known for its innovative approach to luxury service. Instead of the old-fashioned, rigid standards, they'd created something new. The concierge desk now featured a digital wall where local artists and businesses could showcase their work. Guests could book experiences ranging from traditional city tours to cultural cooking classes led by the hotel's diverse kitchen staff. In the newly opened Mentor Cafe, hospitality students from local colleges gathered every Wednesday to learn from industry professionals. The front desk manager, once the face of discrimination, now led sessions on transforming customer service. His personal story of change had become part of the hotel's new narrative. "I used to think luxury meant exclusion," he told a group of students. "Now I understand it means making everyone feel extraordinary." The hotel's restaurant had been completely reimagined. Instead of the usual stuffy fine dining, they'd created an innovative space where traditional luxury met global flavors. Guest chefs from different backgrounds rotated through, bringing their unique perspectives to the kitchen. The waiting list for dinner reservations stretched months ahead. One evening, a wealthy businessman who'd been staying at the hotel for 20 years approached the owner. "I'll be honest," he said, "I was skeptical about all these changes. But this place has never felt more luxurious. It's alive now." The spa and wellness center became a showcase for healing traditions from around the world. Ancient remedies merged with modern techniques, creating unique treatments that attracted guests from across the country. The staff, trained in various cultural approaches to wellness, shared their knowledge proudly. Technology played a big part in the Renaissance. The owner's tech background came in handy as they installed smart systems throughout the hotel. Guests could customize their room settings through an app, request services in multiple languages, and even take virtual tours of local cultural sites from their rooms. But the real innovation was in the people. Every employee had a chance to pitch ideas for improvement. A housekeeper's suggestion led to an eco-friendly room service program that reduced waste by 40%. A doorman's idea sparked a popular cultural exchange program where staff could share their heritage with interested guests. The hotel started an incubator program for minority-owned small businesses in the hospitality industry. The Grand Ballroom, once reserved for society galas, now regularly hosted startup showcases and networking events for underrepresented entrepreneurs. "We're not just running a hotel," the owner told a journalist who came to write about the transformation. "We're proving that inclusion and luxury aren't opposites, they're partners." The changes attracted attention from the entire industry. Other hotels sent representatives to learn from their example. The owner made sure to credit her staff for each innovation, giving them platforms to share their experiences and ideas. One rainy evening, she found herself back in the lobby where she'd once been turned away. A young woman in a business suit was checking in, looking nervous but determined. She watched as the front desk staff welcomed her warmly, noticed her tech company logo, and connected her with other tech entrepreneurs staying at the hotel. That's when she knew they hadn't just changed a hotel. They'd created a new standard for what luxury could be. As she walked through the bustling lobby, past the diverse groups of guests and staff chatting like old friends, she realized this was more than a business success. It was a testament to what happens when you give everyone a chance to shine. 1 year had passed, and the Wellington Hotel stood proudly in the heart of Manhattan, no longer just a building of brick and marble, but a symbol of what change could look like. The morning sun caught the brass doors as a steady stream of guests flowed in and out, each one greeted with genuine warmth regardless of their appearance or background. Inside the bustling lobby, a film crew was setting up their equipment. The hotel's transformation had caught the attention of a major business network, which was filming a documentary about successful corporate turnarounds. But the real story was happening in the everyday moments around them. At the front desk, the former manager, the same one who had once turned the owner away, was training a new employee. "Remember," he said, "our job isn't just checking people in. It's making sure everyone feels like they belong here." His voice carried the weight of personal experience, of lessons learned the hard way. The hotel's occupancy rates had broken all previous records. The waiting list for rooms stretched months ahead, and their event spaces were booked solid. But numbers told only part of the story. The real success could be seen in the small moments. A young entrepreneur closing her first major deal in the business center, an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary in the restaurant, a family from overseas feeling at home thousands of miles away from their own. In the employee break room, photos covered an entire wall, snapshots of staff celebrations, promotions, and achievements. The housekeeping supervisor, who'd been passed over for promotion many times in the past, was now head of operations, her management style bringing a new level of efficiency and compassion to the role. The owner walked through the corridors, stopping to chat with staff and guests. A year ago, these same halls had been filled with tension and unspoken rules about who belonged where. Now, laughter and conversation echoed freely. The change wasn't just in policies, it was in the very air they breathed. The hotel's success had sparked a movement in the industry. Other luxury hotels sent their managers to learn from their example. The owner made sure these visits included talks with staff at all levels, not just executives. Real change, she knew, had to flow through every level of an organization. In the kitchen, the head chef was teaching a masterclass to culinary students from local schools. Many of them came from neighborhoods where luxury hotels had seemed like unreachable dreams. Now they were learning that talent and hard work could open any door. The biggest surprise came from the business results. By opening their doors wider, they hadn't diminished their luxury status, they'd enhanced it. Wealthy clients praised the hotel's authentic atmosphere and diverse perspectives. The restaurant's fusion menu had earned critical acclaim. The spa's multicultural treatments had a 6-month waiting list. Late one evening, as the owner sat in her office reviewing the year's achievements, her assistant brought in a letter. It was from a young girl who had visited with her family. "Thank you," she wrote, "for showing me that I can be anything I want to be." The letter joined hundreds of others in a special album, messages from guests and employees whose lives had been touched by the hotel's transformation. Each story was a reminder that success wasn't just about profits, it was about impact. As the film crew packed up their equipment, the producer asked the owner what she was most proud of. She looked around the lobby, watching the natural flow of life in her hotel. A businessman chatting with a housekeeper about their shared hometown. A young artist sketching in the corner, her work soon to be featured in the hotel's gallery. A former skeptic of change now leading a diversity workshop in the conference room. "We didn't just change a hotel," she replied. "We changed minds. We showed that luxury isn't about excluding people, it's about elevating everyone. That's our real legacy." The sun was setting over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the hotel's windows. Another day was ending at the Wellington, but its story and its impact would continue long into the future, a testament to what happens when someone turns rejection into revolution and prejudice into possibility.